It was a cold evening in a quiet little town. The sky was painted in shades of gray, and the wind whispered softly through the empty streets. Inside a small wooden house at the end of Maple Lane lived an old man named Henry Walker. His life had always been simple, too simple for some, too boring for others. He wore the same brown coat every winter, sat on the same old chair every morning, and drank tea from a cracked white cup that had been with him for years. Henry had worked hard all his life. He had once been a factory worker, spending long hours on the floor, saving every penny for his children. But now, after years of sacrifice, he found himself alone. His children had grown up and moved far away. They only called him when they needed money or help. His house was small, his savings low, and his heart heavy with silence. That night, as the clock ticked slowly, Henry sat by the dim light of a table lamp, holding a lottery ticket in his shaky hands. He had bought it days ago from the little store down the street, more out of habit than hope. Every Thursday, he bought one ticket, just one, with the same quiet dream, maybe this time, luck will smile on me. He took a deep breath and turned on the old television. The lottery numbers flashed across the screen. One by one, he read them aloud. 6, 13, 22, 35, 48, and the Powerball, 9. He blinked, then looked at his ticket again. His heart stopped for a moment. The numbers matched. All of them. He sat frozen, the ticket trembling in his fingers. His breath came out in short gasps. No, this can't be, he whispered. He rubbed his eyes and checked again. The numbers were the same. Slowly, the truth began to sink in. He wasn't dreaming. Henry Walker, the quiet, lonely old man from Maple Lane, had just won $333 million. He leaned back in his chair, his heart pounding. The room felt suddenly smaller, filled with the sound of his own heartbeat. For a long time, he said nothing. No laughter, no excitement, no jumping around. Just silence. The world outside was still, but inside his heart, a storm was rising. He stood up, walked to the window, and looked out into the darkness. The street light flickered. The old mailbox stood crooked at the edge of his yard. Everything looked the same, but nothing was the same anymore. A man who had been invisible to the world was now one of the richest people in the state. He could buy a new house, travel the world, live like a king. But instead of joy, Henry felt something else, a strange kind of fear. He thought about his family, his two sons, Robert and David, and his daughter, Linda. They hadn't visited him in months. When they did, it was only to ask for help with bills or loans. He remembered the last time Robert came. It wasn't to check on him, it was to ask for money to buy a new car. When Henry said no, Robert's voice had turned cold. "You're selfish, Dad. You've got money saved and you just sit on it." That night, Henry had cried quietly after his son left. And now, as he looked at the ticket, the memory of that moment returned. He whispered to himself, if they knew I had this money, they'd come running. Not because they love me. Because they want what I have. Henry sat back down and stared at the glowing TV screen. He thought for hours. The clock struck midnight, and the tea in his cup had gone cold. Finally, he made a decision, one that would change everything. "No one can know," he said softly. "Not a soul." He took the winning ticket and placed it carefully inside an old Bible, between the pages of the Book of Psalms. He closed it gently, as if hiding a sacred secret. Then he turned off the light and sat in the dark for a long time. The next morning, Henry walked to the small law office downtown. The young lawyer, Mr. Collins, greeted him politely. Henry told him in a quiet voice that he wanted to claim his winnings privately, without revealing his name. Collins was surprised but agreed to help. Within a week, the money was transferred into a trust account under a private name. Henry now owned more money than he could ever spend. But his house looked just as broken as before. He didn't buy new clothes or cars. He didn't tell his family. Instead, he decided to pretend, to act like nothing had changed. Days turned into weeks. The news spread in town that someone from Maple Lane had won the big lottery, but no one knew who. Henry would smile quietly whenever he heard people talking about it in the grocery store. "Whoever that lucky person is," the cashier would say, "they must be living their best life now." Henry would just nod, pushing his cart slowly, saying nothing. But deep inside, an idea had begun to grow, small and dangerous. He wanted to test something. He wanted to see who truly cared about him when he had nothing to give. One afternoon, he invited his children over. It had been months since he'd seen them all together. When they arrived, they looked around the house with disappointed faces. Robert said, "Dad, you really need to fix this place. It's falling apart." Linda frowned, "You're still wearing the same clothes, Dad?" David sighed, "You should sell this old place and move in with one of us." Henry smiled gently and said, "I'm fine here. I don't have much money left anyway." The room went quiet. His words hung heavy in the air. Linda's eyes narrowed. "You mean, you're broke?" Henry nodded slowly. "I guess you could say that." No one spoke for a while. Then Robert laughed awkwardly. "Well, I guess you'll be fine, Dad. You always are." They stayed for just 30 minutes. Then they left, each one making an excuse, "Got to pick up the kids, got to work early tomorrow, we'll visit again soon." But they didn't come back. A week passed. Then 2. Not one phone call. Not one visit. Henry sat by the window each evening, watching the sunset, his heart growing heavier. But there was one person who still came, Ethan, his 19-year-old grandson. Ethan would drop by after college, bringing groceries and helping his grandfather fix things around the house. He never asked for money or complained about the cold house. One evening, as they ate together, Ethan said, "Grandpa, why do you always sit alone like this? You should come visit us more." Henry smiled softly. "Oh, I'm fine right here, son. I like the quiet." Ethan looked around the old house and said, "If you ever need anything at all, I'll be here, okay?" Henry's eyes glistened. "You're a good boy, Ethan." That night, after Ethan left, Henry stood in front of the mirror. The reflection of an old, tired man stared back at him. But behind that reflection was a secret so powerful it could change lives. He whispered, "Let's see who truly loves me." The next morning, Henry made his plan clear in his mind. He would make his life look worse, poorer, weaker, lonelier. He would act like he had lost everything. He would give his family a chance to show if their love was real or just an illusion. He called his lawyer again and said, "Mr. Collins, I need you to keep everything hidden. Not a word to anyone, even if they ask." The lawyer agreed, though puzzled. Henry started to live like a man who had nothing. He stopped paying for repairs. He wore older clothes. He even let his roof leak when it rained. Soon, neighbors began to whisper, "Poor old Henry. He's really fallen on hard times." And while everyone believed he was broke, Henry would quietly check his secret bank account at night, a number so large it barely felt real. But he didn't smile when he saw it. Instead, he sighed. Because all that money couldn't buy what he truly wanted: love, loyalty, family. One evening, as he sat on his porch, a cold wind blew across the yard. The street was empty, but his heart was full of thoughts. He closed his eyes and murmured, "Money shows the truth of people's hearts." Inside, the old Bible still held the winning ticket, untouched. Henry ran his hand across it gently and said to himself, "This is my secret and my test." Little did he know, that test would soon change not just his life, but the lives of everyone around him, forever. And as the clock struck midnight again, Henry Walker smiled faintly, the kind of smile that hides both pain and power. He whispered into the dark room, "Tomorrow, the truth begins." Morning sunlight crept through the dusty curtains of Henry's small living room. The air was still, filled with the smell of old wood and memories. Henry sat at his table with a notebook open before him. He had written one simple line across the top of the page, "To know who truly loves me." He read the line over and over again, as if it were a prayer. The plan he had begun to imagine last night was now clear in his mind. He would continue pretending to be poor, so poor that everyone around him would believe he had nothing left. He wanted to see how his family would treat him when they thought he had nothing to give. Henry looked at the phone on the table. It had been nearly 3 weeks since his children last called. Not a message, not a single visit. His son Robert had always been busy chasing money, his daughter Linda was caught up in her own world, and David, the youngest, hadn't spoken to him in months after a silly argument about inheritance. But Ethan, his grandson, came almost every evening. That boy's smile was like light in a dark house. He never came empty-handed, sometimes he brought fresh bread, sometimes a bag of apples. He would sit beside Henry and talk about his dreams, about college, and about his plans to work hard and build a better life. Henry loved those talks more than anything. Sometimes, he would hide his tears by pretending to clean his glasses. That morning, Henry put on his old coat and walked to the lawyer's office once again. Mr. Collins, the young lawyer, looked surprised to see him. "Mr. Walker, back so soon?" Henry nodded. "Yes, I need a favor." He leaned closer and said softly, "I want to transfer all my money to a private account. No one, not even my family, should know it exists. Can you handle that?" The lawyer frowned a little. "That's a big decision, sir. Are you sure you don't want to tell anyone?" Henry smiled faintly. "Mr. Collins, when people know you have money, they start to see you differently. I need to know who they really are before I trust anyone." Mr. Collins studied him for a moment, then nodded. "As you wish, Mr. Walker." Within days, every dollar of the $333 million was moved into a new identity, protected and secret. Henry left the office feeling lighter, not because of the money, but because of the strange power of his secret. He was no longer the helpless old man everyone pitied. He was a quiet observer, a man watching truth reveal itself. Weeks passed, and Henry's act began. He stopped calling his children first. He let his old truck rust in the driveway. When it broke down, he didn't fix it. He even told a few neighbors that he was struggling to pay bills. Before long, the whispers began. "Poor Henry Walker," one woman said in the grocery store. "Used to help everyone. Now he can't even afford his heating. He should ask his children for help," another replied. "But you know how families are these days." Henry listened quietly, pretending not to hear. That evening, Robert showed up at his door. Henry's heart jumped. Maybe, just maybe, his son had come to spend time with him. But the hope faded as soon as Robert spoke. "Dad, I heard you're not doing so well," Robert said, forcing a smile. "Listen, I've been thinking, maybe you should sell this place and move into a small apartment. You'll get some money from the sale, and I won't have to worry about you freezing in this old house." Henry smiled politely. "That's kind of you, son, but I think I'll stay. This house has too many memories to leave behind." Robert sighed. "It's just not practical, Dad. I can help you find a buyer. The land alone is worth something. If you get a good deal, maybe you'll have enough to live comfortably." Henry looked at him carefully. He could see the greed hiding behind his son's polite tone. "You want me to sell it so you can handle the money, don't you?" Robert's face changed. "That's not fair, Dad. I'm only trying to help." Henry smiled again and said softly, "I appreciate it, son. But no. I'll manage." Robert left soon after, muttering something under his breath. Henry watched him walk away through the window. A deep sadness filled his chest. He whispered, "So this is how love looks when money is gone." A few days later, his daughter Linda called. Dad, Robert told me you're broke. Is that true? Henry answered, yes, things are a little tight these days. Linda sighed. You should have planned better. Anyway, I'm sending you some food next week, but I can't help with money right now. We're saving for a vacation. Henry thanked her, though his voice cracked a little. After she hung up, he sat in silence, looking at the family pictures on the wall. The smiling faces in those photos now looked different, colder somehow. He decided to take the act further. He cancelled some small expenses. He started wearing older clothes and stopped heating the house at night. When his neighbors asked, he said with a tired smile, I guess I'm getting old. Don't have much left to spend. But through all this, Ethan kept coming. He never complained about the cold house or the old furniture. One snowy evening, Ethan knocked on the door with a box of groceries. Hey, Grandpa, he said, smiling. You look tired. Have you eaten? Henry smiled warmly. Not yet, son. Come in. It's too cold out there. Ethan set the box down and began unpacking it. Mom said you might be struggling a little. Don't worry. I'll bring food every week if I have to. Henry's eyes softened. You shouldn't waste your money on me, Ethan. Ethan laughed. It's not a waste. You've done enough for all of us. It's my turn now. Those words hit Henry's heart like sunlight breaking through clouds. Later that night, after Ethan left, Henry sat by the fireplace. The flames danced gently, lighting up his face. He whispered, one heart stayed true. A few more weeks passed. Henry noticed his family visiting less and less. His phone barely rang. His children stopped checking in altogether. But Ethan never stopped coming. One night, Henry pretended to cough hard when Ethan arrived. Grandpa, are you okay? Ethan asked, worried. I'm fine, son. Just tired, Henry said weakly. Old age catching up to me. Ethan helped him sit down and made tea for both of them. Henry watched the boy move around the kitchen, realizing how much kindness could live in such a young heart. Ethan, Henry said quietly, why do you keep helping me when everyone else has stopped? Ethan looked confused. Because you're my grandfather. That's what family does. Henry smiled faintly. You'll understand one day, my boy, not everyone thinks that way. One morning, Henry decided to push his plan further. He wanted to see what would happen if things looked truly desperate. He told Robert on the phone that he couldn't pay his bills anymore. Robert sighed loudly. Dad, I can't help right now. We've got our own expenses. Maybe you can sell some of your old things. Henry thanked him and hung up. Then he called Linda. She gave the same answer. David didn't even answer his phone. That night, Henry sat by his window, watching the snow fall outside. The world was quiet except for the ticking clock on the wall. In that silence, he realized something powerful: money had never been his weakness. It was people's hearts that had failed him. He whispered to himself, they left me when they thought I had nothing. But the one who stayed will one day know the truth. Days turned into months. Henry's health began to weaken slightly, he moved slower, slept more. Ethan still came, mowing the lawn, cleaning the house, cooking simple meals. Every time he left, he hugged Henry tightly and said, "Take care, Grandpa." Henry would smile and say, "You too, son. You're all I have now." And he meant it. Late one night, Henry took out the Bible again. He opened it to the same page and looked at the folded lottery ticket hidden inside. His fingers traced the edge of the paper gently. "This small piece of paper," he said softly, "showed me more truth than a lifetime of words ever could." He closed the Bible and looked around the small, silent house. "Now," he whispered, "it's time to see how far this test will go." The next morning, Henry made another decision. He visited his lawyer once again. "Mr. Collins," he said, "I want to prepare something. A document, my will. But not the final one. Just a plan." The lawyer raised an eyebrow. "A plan for what, Mr. Walker?" Henry's eyes glinted with quiet determination. "For a story that isn't over yet. A story that will show who deserves what's truly mine." The lawyer hesitated, then nodded slowly. "As you wish." When Henry left the office, he felt a strange calmness inside him. The test had begun quietly, but now it would move towards something bigger, something that would reveal every heart around him. As he walked home through the chilly wind, snowflakes landed softly on his coat. He looked up at the sky and murmured, "Truth takes time. But it always shows." Henry didn't know it yet, but the next part of his plan would test not only his family's love but also his own strength. Because pretending to be poor was easy, but watching people you love turn away from you, that was the hardest part of all. And as he closed the door behind him that night, his old house echoing with silence, Henry whispered the words that would shape everything to come. "Let's see what they do when they think I've lost it all." Winter faded into spring, but inside Henry Walker's heart, the cold still lingered. The days had become slow and silent. His house, once filled with the laughter of children, now echoed only with the sound of creaking floors and the ticking of an old clock. The world outside bloomed with life, flowers, sunshine, birds, but Henry's home looked lonely. The paint on the walls had begun to peel, the curtains hung dull with dust, and the garden that once overflowed with roses was now just dry earth. Henry sat by the window every morning, waiting. Waiting for someone, anyone, from his family to knock on his door. But no one came. Except Ethan. Ethan's visits were like sunlight in a dark room. He always brought warmth, laughter, and hope. He talked about his college life, his dreams, and sometimes, about his worries. Henry listened patiently, hiding the truth that could change Ethan's life forever, the truth about the $333 million he had secretly won. But Henry's plan was still in motion. He wanted to see how far greed would go before he revealed the truth. One afternoon, as Henry was sweeping the porch, his neighbor Mrs. Cooper called out from across the fence. "Henry, dear. I heard your son Robert bought a new car again. Must be nice, eh?" Henry looked up and smiled faintly. "Yes, he's doing well for himself." Mrs. Cooper nodded. "He's a good man, I'm sure he helps you out too, doesn't he?" Henry paused. The broom stopped mid-air. "Not really," he said softly. "They've all been quite busy lately." Mrs. Cooper frowned. "That's a shame. You did so much for them." Henry nodded, forcing a smile, but inside his chest, a dull ache grew heavier. He turned away and continued sweeping, whispering under his breath, "Maybe they've already forgotten who raised them." That evening, the phone rang. It was Robert. "Dad," Robert began, his voice too casual, "I've been meaning to call you." "How are you holding up?" "I'm fine, son." "Still managing," Henry said. That's good," Robert replied quickly. "Listen, I've been thinking. If things ever get too hard for you, maybe you should sell your house. I know a guy who could get you a good deal." Henry smiled bitterly. "You mean, you could get a good deal, right?" Robert laughed awkwardly. "Oh, come on, Dad. Don't say that. I'm just looking out for you." Henry's voice softened, calm but sharp. "You know, son, when I had money, everyone came around. Now that I don't, I barely get a hello. Do you ever think about that?" There was a long pause. Then Robert said, "Dad, don't make this about love. It's just life. People are busy." Henry whispered, "Yes. Too busy for love." He hung up quietly. His hands trembled slightly as he set the phone down. He could feel the truth sinking deeper. Money didn't change people, it only revealed them. A few days later, Linda showed up unannounced. She stepped into the house with a tight smile, wearing a fancy dress and expensive perfume. "Dad, this place looks terrible," she said, wrinkling her nose. "You really should move somewhere better." Henry chuckled softly. "I would if I could afford it." Linda sighed dramatically. "I told you years ago to save more. You always wasted money helping people." Henry looked at her gently. "Helping people isn't a waste, dear." She rolled her eyes. "Well, it doesn't pay bills either. Anyway, I just came to check on you. Robert told me you might be struggling." "I'm managing," Henry replied. "I always do." Linda hesitated, then leaned forward. "Dad, can I ask something? When you pass away, what happens to this house? I mean, do you have a will or something?" Henry's heart skipped a beat. He looked into her eyes. There was no concern in them, only calculation. He smiled faintly. "Don't worry about that, dear. Everything will be taken care of." Linda smiled too, but it was the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Good. I just don't want any confusion later, you know?" Henry nodded silently. He knew exactly what she meant. When she left, he sat down on the couch and stared at the wall. His eyes filled with quiet sadness. "They don't even hide it anymore," he murmured. "Not even the greed." That weekend, Ethan came over as usual. He noticed the tired look in his grandfather's eyes. "Grandpa, are you okay? You look sad." Henry smiled softly. "I'm fine, son. Just old memories." Ethan sat beside him. "You know, Mom and Uncle Robert were talking the other day. They said you should move into a nursing home. But I told them no way. You belong here, in your home." Henry's heart warmed. "You said that?" Ethan nodded. "Of course. You raised them. You deserve respect, not pity." Henry reached out and patted his grandson's shoulder. "You're a good man, Ethan. Never let the world change your heart." Ethan smiled shyly. "You sound like one of those old wise men from movies." Henry laughed softly. "Maybe I've seen too many of them." The days went on, and Henry's act continued. He told everyone he was behind on bills. He even stopped mowing his lawn. Slowly, his family stopped calling altogether. Until one day, something unexpected happened. Henry got sick. It started as a simple cold, but soon turned into a serious cough. His chest hurt, and his breathing grew weak. For a few days, he tried to hide it, but eventually, Ethan noticed. "Grandpa, you're burning up," Ethan said, touching his forehead. "We're going to the hospital." Henry tried to protest. No, I'll be fine. Don't waste money." Ethan shook his head firmly. "You're my family. You're not going anywhere like this." He helped Henry into the car and drove him to the hospital. The doctors admitted him immediately. Ethan stayed by his side, holding his hand as machines beeped softly in the background. Henry looked at his grandson and whispered, "Don't tell anyone yet, okay?" Ethan frowned. "But your kids, shouldn't they know?" Henry shook his head. "Let's just see if they call first." Days passed. Not a single one of Henry's children came. Not one phone call, not one message. Only Ethan stayed, sleeping on a chair beside the hospital bed, bringing water, helping the nurses. Henry watched him quietly. Sometimes, late at night, he pretended to sleep and listened to Ethan whisper prayers for him. "Please, God, don't take him yet," Ethan would say. "He's all I have." Henry's heart ached. He wished he could tell Ethan everything, that he was the true heir to his secret fortune, that all of this was a test. But he stayed silent. The time wasn't right yet. A week later, Linda finally showed up. She walked into the hospital room with a fake smile and a bright red purse. "Oh, Dad, you look awful," she said. "Why didn't you tell us you were sick?" Henry looked at her calmly. "I didn't want to bother anyone." She laughed lightly. "Don't be silly. Of course, we care. It's just that we've been so busy. You know how life is." Henry smiled weakly. "Yes, I know how it is." Robert arrived later that evening. His first question wasn't "How are you?" but "What's the hospital bill?" Henry looked at him with quiet disappointment. "Don't worry about that, son. The hospital helps old men like me." Robert nodded quickly, relieved. "Oh, that's good then." They both stayed for only 20 minutes before leaving. Ethan stayed all night. After they left, Henry turned to Ethan. "You see, son, love is a strange thing. Some say it with words, others show it with actions. Now I know which one matters more." Ethan frowned. "Grandpa, don't talk like that. You're going to be fine." Henry smiled faintly. "Maybe. But even if I'm not, I'll make sure you're fine." Ethan didn't understand what he meant, but he just nodded and squeezed his grandfather's hand. That night, Henry couldn't sleep. He looked out the hospital window at the glowing city lights. He thought of the money hidden away, the lawyer who held his secret, and the family who didn't care unless it benefited them. Then he thought of Ethan, the only one who stayed when everyone else walked away. Henry reached for his phone and called his lawyer. "Mr. Collins," he whispered. "It's time. Prepare the documents we discussed. And make sure Ethan's name is on them." The lawyer was surprised. "Are you sure, sir?" Henry nodded. "Completely sure." He ended the call and looked at Ethan sleeping in the chair beside him. A small smile formed on his face. "The test is almost over," he whispered. "And the truth has spoken louder than any words." When the morning came, Henry closed his eyes and let the sun fall across his face through the window. He could feel peace settling inside him, not because of his wealth, but because he had found what he was looking for, the only heart that truly cared. And though his body was weak, his spirit was strong. He knew what his next step would be. Soon, the world would see what love really meant, and what greed would cost. The morning sun rose quietly over the small town, painting soft gold across the hospital windows. Inside room 206, Henry Walker lay still, his frail hands resting on the blanket. Machines beside his bed beeped gently, marking every beat of his aging heart. The air smelled of medicine and bleach. Nurses moved in and out of rooms, their voices low and hurried. Henry had been there for almost 2 weeks. His sickness had worsened at first, then slowly began to calm. His body was weak, but his mind was sharp, sharper than ever. He watched everything. He noticed who came, who didn't, who asked questions out of love, and who only pretended. So far, the truth was clear, only Ethan had stayed. Ethan came every morning before class and every evening after work. He brought books, soup, and stories. He cleaned the small hospital table, made sure the blankets stayed warm, and joked to keep his grandfather smiling. But Henry's children? They came only twice. Each visit was short, filled with fake smiles and empty words. They looked at their watches more than they looked at their father. Robert always asked about money. "Dad, do you have insurance? The bills must be high." Linda complained. "Hospitals are depressing. You should have taken better care of yourself." David didn't come at all. He sent a short message, "Hope you get well soon." Henry read that message 3 times, then quietly deleted it. One night, after everyone had left, Henry lay awake. The room was dark except for the faint blue light of the monitor beside him. He stared at the ceiling, his mind spinning. He whispered to himself, so this is what love looks like when money disappears. He turned his head slightly and looked at Ethan, who was asleep in a chair beside the bed, his jacket pulled around him like a blanket. The boy had refused to leave. Every night, he'd say, "I'll stay, Grandpa. What if you need something?" Henry smiled softly. A single tear rolled down his cheek. "You're the only one who remembers what family means," he murmured. But in the back of his mind, another thought began to grow. It's time to move to the final part of the test. The next morning, Henry called for the nurse and asked to use the hospital phone. He dialed Mr. Collins, his lawyer. "Mr. Collins, it's me, Henry Walker." "Ah, Mr. Walker," the lawyer replied. "How are you feeling?" "I'm feeling ready," Henry said slowly. "I want to sign the papers we talked about." "The will?" Mr. Collins hesitated. "Are you sure, sir? It's a serious decision." Henry looked at Ethan, who was still asleep in the chair. A small smile appeared on his lips. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." "Very well, Mr. Walker. I'll come by this afternoon." When the lawyer arrived, Henry asked Ethan to go get some coffee. "I'll be fine, son. Just want to talk to this man for a few minutes." Ethan nodded and left the room. As soon as the door closed, Henry turned serious. "Mr. Collins, everything I own, the money, the house, the accounts, everything goes to Ethan Walker. No one else." The lawyer blinked. "All of it, sir?" Henry nodded. "Yes. My children had their chance. They failed my test. This boy, he passed it without even knowing it existed." Mr. Collins smiled faintly. "You know, sir, I've seen many families fight over money. But I've never seen a man as clear-hearted as you." Henry chuckled weakly. "It's not clarity, Mr. Collins. It's heartbreak." He signed the papers slowly, his hand trembling slightly, but his heart steady. As the lawyer left, Henry looked out the window. Rain had begun to fall, soft and cold against the glass. Later that evening, Ethan returned with coffee. Henry was sitting up, smiling gently. "What's with that smile, Grandpa?" Ethan asked, setting the cup down. "Just thinking," Henry said. "About how lucky I am." Ethan laughed. "Lucky? You're stuck in a hospital." Henry chuckled softly. "Yes, but I have someone who cares enough to stay." Ethan smiled, though he didn't understand the deeper meaning of those words. That night, Henry decided to add a twist to his test, one last step. He wanted to see what his family would do if they thought he was gone. A few days later, Henry's condition suddenly got worse. His breathing slowed, and his eyes became heavy. The nurses rushed in. They called Ethan, who arrived in tears, gripping his grandfather's hand. "Grandpa, please stay awake. I'm here." "Don't go," Ethan cried. Henry whispered weakly, "Don't cry, my boy. Everything happens for a reason." Then, before Ethan could say more, the monitors beeped rapidly, and Henry's eyes closed. Doctors came running. Nurses shouted instructions. Ethan was pulled from the room as they tried to revive him. Minutes later, the doctor came out and placed a gentle hand on Ethan's shoulder. "I'm sorry, son. He's gone." Ethan's world went silent. The hospital called Henry's family. Robert and Linda arrived the next day, dressed in black but wearing no real sadness. They handled things quickly, without emotion. Robert said, "We should check his house, see what's left." Linda nodded. "Yes, we'll need to sort the will too." Ethan stood nearby, his face pale with grief. "Could you two stop talking about money? He just died." Robert turned sharply. Don't talk to me like that, kid. You don't understand how these things work. Ethan's eyes filled with tears. I understand enough. I was there. You weren't. Henry's body was taken home for a small funeral. The children looked more annoyed than heartbroken. Neighbors came to pay respect, whispering, he was such a kind man. Ethan stayed by the coffin all night. He held his grandfather's old Bible and cried silently. After the funeral, something unexpected happened. A man in a black suit arrived at Henry's house. He introduced himself politely. My name is Mr. Collins. I'm Mr. Walker's lawyer. Robert's eyes lit up. Ah, finally. The will. Mr. Collins nodded. Yes, but before that, I was asked to deliver a letter. Specifically to Ethan Walker. Ethan looked confused. To me? Mr. Collins handed him an envelope. The handwriting was shaky but familiar, it was Henry's. Ethan opened it slowly. The letter read, My dear Ethan, if you're reading this, it means I've gone to a quieter place. Don't be sad, my boy. You gave me more joy than all the money in the world. When everyone turned away, you stayed. You cared for me when they saw no value left in me. I want you to know something, I was never poor. I won $333 million in the lottery. But I hid it, to see who truly loved me. You, Ethan, are that person. Everything I have now belongs to you. Use it well. Help others. And never let money change the kindness in your heart. Love, Grandpa. Ethan froze, unable to breathe. The paper trembled in his hands. His voice cracked as he whispered, He wasn't poor? Mr. Collins nodded. It's true. Your grandfather was one of the richest men in the state. But he wanted to see who would stand by him when he had nothing. Robert's face went pale. What do you mean everything belongs to him? That's not possible. Mr. Collins adjusted his glasses. Mr. Walker's final will leaves the entire fortune to Ethan Walker. I'm sorry, but that's the legal truth. Linda gasped. You can't be serious. He was just a kid. Ethan stood there in shock, tears streaming down his face. He did all this to test us. Mr. Collins nodded. And it seems you're the only one who passed. That night, as Ethan sat alone in Henry's house, holding the Bible with the hidden lottery ticket still inside, he whispered, You knew, Grandpa. You always knew. He placed the Bible on the table, tears falling freely. The wind outside howled softly, almost like Henry's voice whispering back, Now you know the truth. But what no one else knew, not yet, was that Henry Walker wasn't truly gone. Miles away, in a quiet cabin by the lake, an old man sat by the fireplace. He watched the flames flicker and smiled faintly. On the table beside him lay a newspaper headline. Local grandfather leaves $333 million to grandson. Henry folded the paper and whispered to himself, Now, let's see what they do next. His eyes glistened with both sadness and peace. His test wasn't over. Not yet. Because sometimes, to know who truly loves you, you have to disappear first. The cabin by the lake was quiet, wrapped in mist and silence. The water glimmered faintly under the moonlight, and the old fireplace crackled softly. Inside, Henry Walker sat in his chair, staring into the flames. His reflection danced in the firelight, an old man who had seen too much, loved too little, and learned the real cost of truth. It had been 2 months since the world believed he was dead. The funeral, the will, the tears, all had gone according to plan. He had watched it all unfold from afar through his lawyer, Mr. Collins, who had sworn to keep his secret. Henry had disappeared quietly after the hospital. The doctors had helped him stage his death, transferring him to a private medical facility where he recovered in silence. When he was strong enough, he moved to the secluded cabin that he secretly owned, a place no one knew about except Mr. Collins. The plan had been perfect. His children thought he was gone forever. His grandson, Ethan, had inherited the money and the house. And now, Henry watched from the shadows to see what would happen next. He whispered to himself, "Now, the real truth begins." Every few days, Mr. Collins would visit, bringing updates. That evening, he arrived just before sunset. The lawyer brushed off the snow from his coat and entered the cabin. Henry poured 2 cups of tea and handed one to him. "Tell me, Collins. How are they handling it?" The lawyer sighed, sitting down. "Ethan has been quiet. He's moved into your house but hasn't touched a penny of the money yet. He's been helping the neighbors, paying off debts for people you used to know. The boy's got a good heart, Mr. Walker." Henry smiled faintly. "Just as I thought. And my children?" Collins hesitated. "They're not doing well. Robert and Linda have both tried to contest the will, but the court rejected it. They've been angry, spreading rumors that Ethan manipulated you. They even went to the media once." Henry leaned back in his chair, the faintest smirk on his face. "They're proving me right all over again." Collins nodded slowly. "They are, sir. But Ethan's handling it with grace. He refuses interviews, avoids attention. He's even been visiting your grave every week." At that, Henry's expression softened. "He visits me?" "Every Sunday," Collins said. "He talks to you like you're still there." For a moment, Henry's eyes glistened. "That boy, he's the only thing I did right in my life." Collins set down his cup. "He's the only one who saw your heart instead of your wallet." The old man nodded, silent for a long time. The only sound was the fire popping gently. Then, with a sudden spark in his eyes, he said, "It's time." Collins looked puzzled. "Time for what, sir?" Henry leaned forward. "To see him. To see my grandson one last time. But not as Henry Walker." The next morning, Henry trimmed his white beard, changed into a thick gray jacket, and put on a wool cap. He looked in the mirror, almost not recognizing himself. The old man in the reflection looked more like a stranger than a millionaire. He whispered to his reflection, "Let's see if the boy's heart is still pure when I'm not a ghost." He took a bus to town, no driver, no escort, no hint of wealth. Just an old man among strangers. When he arrived near his old house, he saw the familiar maple trees swaying in the wind. Everything looked the same, yet so different. The fence was newly painted, the garden cared for. He watched quietly from across the street as Ethan stepped outside, carrying groceries. Ethan looked older somehow, more serious. He smiled at the mailman, helped an elderly neighbor carry bags, then went back inside. Henry's chest tightened. He's still the same. Later that day, Henry decided to visit him. He knocked softly on the door, his heart racing like it hadn't in years. After a moment, Ethan opened it. He looked surprised to see the old man standing there. "Hello, young man," Henry said in a shaky voice. "I'm sorry to bother you. My car broke down near here, and I just needed a bit of water if that's all right." Ethan smiled kindly. "Of course, sir. Come in, it's cold out there." Henry stepped inside, looking around. The house was clean, warm, and filled with photos, some of Henry, some of Ethan, and even one from the funeral. He looked at them quietly, his eyes soft with emotion. "You live alone?" Henry asked. "Yes, sir," Ethan said, pouring him a glass of water. "It was my grandfather's house. I'm just keeping it the way he liked it." Henry's hand trembled slightly as he took the glass. "You must have loved him a lot." Ethan nodded. "He was more than a grandfather. He was my best friend." Henry smiled faintly. He must have been a lucky man. Ethan chuckled softly. I think I was the lucky one. Those simple words broke something inside Henry. His throat tightened, his eyes stung. He wanted to hug him, to say, "It's me, Ethan. I'm right here." But he couldn't. Not yet. Instead, he asked, "What will you do with your life now, son?" Ethan looked thoughtful. "I'm going to start a community center. For old people who are alone. My grandpa always said loneliness is worse than hunger." Henry froze. The words hit him like a wave. That was something he had said years ago, sitting on that same porch with Ethan as a child. He swallowed hard. "That's a beautiful thing, boy." Ethan smiled. "He taught me to help people, not because they can help me back, but because it's the right thing to do." Henry couldn't hold it anymore. Tears filled his eyes. He stood up suddenly. "Thank you for the water. You're a good young man." As he turned to leave, Ethan said, "Wait, what's your name, sir?" Henry paused at the door. "Call me George," he said softly, and left. That night, Henry sat by the lake again, tears rolling down his face. He didn't change. Not even after all this. "You did it, boy. You really did." He looked up at the stars and whispered, "Maybe it's time to end the act." A few days later, Mr. Collins arrived again. Henry told him everything that had happened. "You saw him?" Collins asked, surprised. "Yes," Henry replied. "And now I know, he's everything I hoped he'd be." Collins nodded. "Then what will you do now?" Henry smiled faintly. "Now, I'll give him one last gift. The truth." That weekend, Ethan received a letter in the mail. It had no return address, only his name written in the same familiar handwriting he had seen before. His heart started to race. He opened it and read, "My dear Ethan, you once said that if I were still alive, you'd tell me you love me one more time. So here I am, my boy, alive, but hidden. I wanted to see who you'd become without my shadow. You've made me proud. You passed every test. You loved me when I had nothing, and you honored me when I was gone. If you wish to see me, follow the trail we once walked by the lake, the one where we used to feed the ducks. I'll be waiting. Grandpa." Ethan's eyes widened. His hands shook. "He's alive?" he whispered. Without hesitation, he grabbed his coat and ran. The lake was quiet, covered in soft fog. Ethan's breath came out in clouds as he walked the old dirt trail. Then, by the cabin, he saw him, an old man in a gray coat, standing near the water. Ethan froze. His voice cracked. "Grandpa?" Henry turned slowly, his eyes filled with tears. "You found me, son." Ethan ran to him, wrapping his arms around him tightly. "You're alive. I thought you were gone." Henry held him close. "I had to know, Ethan. I had to see who loved me for me, not for what I had." Ethan pulled back, crying. "You didn't have to test me. You're all I ever wanted." Henry smiled through his tears. "And now I know that's true." They stood there, the lake reflecting the pale sunlight, two hearts finally whole again. Henry looked out across the water and said softly, "Money can build houses, Ethan, but only love builds homes." Ethan nodded, his voice trembling. "Then let's go home, Grandpa." Henry smiled, the kind of smile that carried peace. "Yes, let's go home." But as they walked back, a car slowly pulled up across the road. Inside, a woman's face glared from the shadows, Linda Walker, Henry's daughter. She had seen everything. Her eyes narrowed, her voice bitter as she whispered to herself, "So the old man's alive, and hiding money again?" She picked up her phone, dialing a number. Robert, you won't believe what I just saw. The peace Henry had waited for was about to shatter again. Because sometimes, when you try to test people's hearts, the real danger begins when they fail. The air at the lake turned heavy that evening, as if the world itself could sense that peace was about to end. Henry and Ethan walked slowly down the quiet dirt path toward the cabin, their hearts full of relief, unaware that danger lurked just behind them. For the first time in years, Henry felt alive. The cold wind against his face, the sound of Ethan's laughter beside him, it all felt like a dream he never wanted to wake from. "You've grown into a good man, Ethan," Henry said, his voice low but proud. "I thought I'd lost everything in this world, but I see now I still have something worth more than all that money." Ethan smiled. "Grandpa, you don't have to hide anymore. We'll tell everyone the truth. We'll live like a family again." Henry stopped walking. His expression darkened slightly. "No, son. We can't tell anyone yet. If your mother and uncles find out, they'll turn this whole world upside down again. They won't stop until they take everything from you." Ethan looked confused. "But they've already tried. The court rejected them." Henry nodded. "Yes, but greed never dies, Ethan. It sleeps, waiting for another chance to wake." Ethan sighed, still not understanding how deep that truth ran. At that very moment, in the shadows beyond the trees, two figures stood silently, Linda and Robert Walker. Linda's eyes were filled with fury. "You see that? He's alive." The old man faked his death. Robert clenched his fists. "He made fools of us. We mourned him, we lost everything, and now he's out here hiding with Ethan like nothing happened." Linda's voice trembled with anger. "He gave everything to that boy. That money should have been ours." Robert's tone turned cold. "Then we'll take it back. One way or another." They disappeared into the woods, their faces hard with greed and revenge. Back at the cabin, Henry prepared dinner. The warm smell of soup filled the air as Ethan helped set the table. For a few peaceful hours, everything felt normal. They ate together, laughed, and shared memories of old times. Henry said softly, "When you were little, you used to sit by this fire and draw pictures of us fishing. You said you wanted to grow up and buy me a big boat." Ethan chuckled. "I still would, if you'd just tell me where you want to go." Henry smiled. "Anywhere peaceful." But deep down, Henry knew peace was never meant to last long in his life. Later that night, when Ethan went to bed, Henry stepped outside. The lake shimmered under the moonlight, calm and still. He took a deep breath, feeling the chill in his bones. "Maybe I was wrong," he whispered to himself. "Maybe hiding the truth only creates more lies." From the trees behind him, a faint sound broke the silence, a crack of a twig. Henry turned sharply. "Who's there?" No answer. Only darkness. The next morning, Ethan woke early to fetch water from the lake. When he returned, he noticed something strange, footprints outside the cabin. Fresh ones. "Grandpa," he called out. Henry came out, tightening his coat. "Yes?" Ethan pointed to the prints. "Someone was here last night." Henry's face turned serious. He stepped closer and examined them. Two people. Heavy steps. They were watching. Ethan frowned. Who would come all the way out here? Henry looked toward the trees, his eyes cold and knowing. People who want what doesn't belong to them. That afternoon, far away in town, Linda and Robert met secretly in a small cafe. The sound of the espresso machine masked their whispering voices. "We can't just go to the police," Linda said. "He faked his death. That's illegal. If we report him, we'll lose everything too." Robert smirked. "Then we won't report him. We'll scare him. Make him think we'll expose his secret, unless he gives us our share." Linda hesitated. You think that'll work? Robert leaned closer. He's old, weak, and guilty. He won't want his precious grandson dragged into this. He'll pay to keep quiet. Linda's expression hardened. Then let's make the old man talk. Back at the cabin, Henry spent the afternoon writing letters, quietly, carefully, as if preparing for something. Ethan walked in and saw the papers spread across the table. What are those? He asked. Henry smiled faintly. Just things I should have said long ago. Words for people who might never listen. Ethan looked worried. You're not planning to leave again, are you? Henry shook his head. Not if I can help it. But that night, as rain began to pour outside, a sharp knock echoed through the cabin. Ethan froze. Who's here at this hour? Henry's heart sank. Stay behind me. He opened the door slowly, and there stood Robert and Linda, soaked from the rain, faces grim. Linda forced a smile. Hello, Dad. Surprised to see us? Henry's eyes narrowed. You shouldn't be here. Robert pushed past him into the cabin. So it's true. You're alive. You faked your death and hid here like a coward. Ethan stepped forward angrily. Watch your tone. You have no right to be here. Linda crossed her arms. Oh, we have every right. He lied to everyone. You think no one will care when they find out he staged his own death? Henry's voice was calm but firm. Leave now. This conversation ends here. Robert smirked. Not until you give us what's ours. Henry took a slow breath. What's yours? You turned your backs on me when you thought I was broke. You left me to die alone. Linda's voice cracked. You don't understand, Dad. We needed help. You had money. Henry's expression hardened. And you had greed. That's what you came for then, and it's what you came for now. The room went quiet except for the rain beating against the windows. Ethan stepped in front of his grandfather. You need to leave before I call the police. Robert laughed coldly. Oh, call them. Tell them what? That your dead grandfather is alive? That he lied to the world about dying? I'm sure that'll go well for both of you. Henry's hands tightened around his cane. You wouldn't dare. Linda's smile turned sharp. Try us. For hours, they argued. Henry tried to reason, Ethan tried to protect, but Robert and Linda wouldn't listen. They demanded half of the money, or they'd reveal everything. Finally, Henry looked tired. You'll destroy your own family for greed. Robert said coldly, there's no family left to destroy. At that, Henry's heart broke a little more. Late that night, when they finally left, Ethan sat beside Henry, furious and shaken. Grandpa, we can't let them get away with this. They're blackmailing you. Henry looked down at the fire, eyes distant. They've already lost everything that mattered. Let them chase the shadows of gold. We'll hold on to the light. Ethan frowned. What do you mean? Henry stood slowly, his old voice calm and deep. It means, Ethan, I'm going to show them that money can't buy peace, but it can reveal truth. He turned to face the window, where lightning flashed across the lake. They wanted a war. I'll give them one, but not the kind they expect. Ethan looked at him in awe and confusion. What are you going to do? Henry smiled faintly. I'm going to disappear again, but this time, they'll never see me coming. That night, Henry wrote a final letter, one that would soon shake the Walker family forever. He sealed it with trembling hands and handed it to Ethan in the morning. Don't open this yet, he said. You'll know when the time is right. Ethan looked into his eyes. Grandpa, are you leaving me again? Henry smiled sadly. Not leaving, my boy. Just stepping out of sight, so the truth can finally stand in the light. As he walked away down the path, the fog swallowed him slowly until he was gone, just like before. But this time, the world wouldn't believe he was dead. Because when greed returns, love must fight harder than ever to survive. And somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled over the lake, signaling that Henry Walker's test was far from over. The morning after Henry disappeared again, a heavy fog covered the small town like a blanket of secrets. The sky was gray, the air thick with unease, and the lake outside the cabin was silent, too silent. Inside, Ethan Walker sat by the fireplace, clutching the sealed letter his grandfather had left him. His hands trembled, his mind a storm of confusion. "Where did you go, Grandpa?" he whispered into the quiet room. He stared at the letter. It felt heavier than paper, as if it carried the weight of his entire life. He wanted to open it, to find answers, but he remembered his grandfather's words, "You'll know when the time is right." So, he waited. But not everyone was waiting in peace. Miles away, in the center of town, Linda and Robert Walker sat in their lawyer's office, their eyes dark with anger and greed. "I'm telling you," Robert said, slamming his hand on the desk. "He's alive. I saw him with my own eyes." The lawyer, a thin man in glasses, raised an eyebrow. "If that's true, it means he committed fraud. Faking a death is a serious crime." Linda leaned forward. "We don't want him arrested. We just want what's ours." Robert nodded sharply. "We'll threaten to go public. The news will eat it up. Old man fakes death to hide fortune. He'll have no choice but to pay us off to keep quiet." The lawyer hesitated. "And if he doesn't?" Robert's lips curled into a cruel smile. "Then we ruin his precious grandson too." Linda said softly, "He loves that boy more than anything. That's where we hit him." The lawyer sighed. "You're walking into dangerous ground." Robert smirked. "No. We're walking into our money." Meanwhile, Ethan had decided to travel back to town. He needed advice, and there was only one man he could trust, Mr. Collins, his grandfather's loyal lawyer. When Ethan entered the office, Collins looked up from his papers and froze. "Ethan. You shouldn't be here." Ethan frowned. "Why not?" The lawyer stood, shutting the door behind him. "Because your uncle and aunt were just here. They're planning something dangerous." Ethan's stomach dropped. "What kind of dangerous?" Collins sighed heavily. "They want to expose your grandfather. They've hired a private investigator. If they find proof he's alive, they'll go to the press and the police. It could ruin him." Ethan's voice trembled. "They wouldn't do that. He's their father." Collins looked at him sadly. "Greed has no bloodline, Ethan." Ethan sank into a chair, his chest tightening. "What do I do?" Collins hesitated. "Maybe it's time to open that letter." That night, Ethan returned to the cabin. The storm had returned, rain slapping the windows, lightning flashing across the sky. He sat at the wooden table, the envelope before him. Slowly, he tore it open. Inside was a short handwritten note and a smaller envelope marked for the end. The letter read, "My dear Ethan, if you are reading this, it means the storm has begun. I have gone into hiding again, but not out of fear, out of necessity. Your aunt and uncles will not stop. They have lost their hearts to greed, and greed is a disease that blinds the soul. Do not fight them with anger. Fight them with truth. If they come for you, give them this smaller envelope. It contains the truth that will end their war, but only when the time comes. Remember, Ethan, money builds walls, but love breaks them. Do not let their darkness pull you under. With love, always. Grandpa." Ethan stared at the words, tears welling in his eyes. Fight them with truth, he whispered. But before he could think further, the sound of an engine roared outside. Headlights flashed through the rain-soaked windows. He froze. Moments later, the front door burst open, and there stood Robert and Linda, their faces hard and cold. Well, Robert said, stepping inside, dripping wet. Look who's all alone in Grandpa's little hideout. Ethan stood, trying to stay calm. You need to leave. Linda smirked. Oh, we're not leaving without something valuable. Robert slammed the door behind him. Where is he, Ethan? Where's dear old Dad hiding this time? Ethan clenched his fists. I don't know. Robert laughed darkly. Don't lie to me. We saw him with you at the lake. Ethan's heart raced. I don't know where he went. Linda stepped closer. Then maybe we'll just tear this place apart until we find something. She began opening drawers, flipping through papers, scattering them on the floor. Ethan tried to stop her, but Robert grabbed him by the collar and shoved him against the wall. You think you can play the hero? Robert growled. He tricked us, and you helped him. Ethan struggled, his voice shaking with fury. He didn't trick you, he showed you who you are. Robert's eyes flashed. Watch your mouth, boy. Linda found the envelope on the table and held it up. What's this? Ethan froze. Don't touch that. Linda smiled wickedly. So this is important, huh? She ripped it open. But inside was only a folded piece of paper. She frowned and opened it. Her eyes widened as she read. Robert snatched it from her hand, scanning the words, and suddenly his face turned pale. The note read, If you are reading this, it means greed has already destroyed what love could have saved. You can take my money, my house, even my name, but you will never have peace. Because while you were chasing fortune, your father was watching from afar, recording everything. At the bottom was a small printed line. Video evidence secured, with the police and my lawyer. Robert's voice broke. What is this? Ethan's voice was calm now. It's the truth. Linda's hands shook. He recorded us? Ethan nodded slowly. All of it. The blackmail, the threats, the night you came here. Grandpa always knew this day would come. Robert's face turned red. He set us up. Ethan stepped forward. No. You set yourselves up. He just gave you the rope to hang your greed. Robert threw the paper into the fire angrily. We'll see who wins this time. He stormed toward the door, Linda following behind, panic written across her face. Before leaving, Linda turned back, her eyes filled with both anger and shame. You don't understand, Ethan. He always loved you more. Ethan replied softly, he loved the one who loved him back. Then they were gone, the sound of their car fading into the storm. 2 days later, the news spread across town. Walker family scandal, children accused of fraud and extortion. The police had received the recordings, voice messages, videos, and documents proving Robert and Linda's attempts to blackmail their father and threaten Ethan. Everything had been sent anonymously from a private address. Ethan smiled when he saw the headline. You were right again, Grandpa, he whispered. Truth always wins. But one question still haunted him, where was Henry now? One evening, Ethan sat by the lake, the sunset painting the sky in gold and red. The air was calm, the water still. He closed his eyes and spoke softly. I did what you asked, Grandpa. The truth is out. But I miss you. I just want you to come home. A faint sound came from behind him, footsteps on gravel. Ethan turned, his heart skipping a beat. There, walking slowly down the old dirt path, was Henry Walker. He looked older, thinner, but his eyes were bright, filled with pride. Grandpa, Ethan whispered. Henry smiled. You did well, my boy. You passed the final test. Ethan ran to him, hugging him tightly. I thought I'd never see you again. Henry chuckled softly. I promised I'd come back when it was time. And it's time now. Ethan stepped back, tears in his eyes. They tried to destroy you, but you outsmarted them all. Henry looked toward the lake, his voice calm. No, Ethan. I didn't destroy them. Their greed did. They stood there quietly as the last light of the sun disappeared behind the hills. Henry placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder. You know, money shows people's hearts, but love reveals their souls. Ethan smiled. Then you taught me well. Henry looked at him proudly. You're the future of this family now. Make it one built on kindness, not wealth. Ethan nodded firmly. I will, Grandpa. And for the first time in years, Henry Walker felt peace. But as they walked back toward the cabin together, far across the lake, two figures watched from a distance, men in dark coats, carrying folders marked Investigation, Walker Case. Henry glanced over his shoulder, sensing something. His smile faded slightly. Seems the world isn't done with me yet, he murmured. Ethan looked at him in confusion. What do you mean? Henry sighed. It's time for one last chapter, my boy. The one that decides how this story truly ends. The wind carried a quiet chill across the lake that night, whispering through the trees like a warning. The storm had passed, but something darker lingered in the air, something that neither Henry nor Ethan could quite name. They sat by the fire in the cabin, the warm glow lighting their faces. For a moment, it felt like peace had returned. But peace, Henry knew, never stayed long in his life. Ethan leaned forward, staring into the flames. Grandpa, you said there's one last chapter. What did you mean? Henry's eyes stayed fixed on the fire. It means, my boy, that some truths don't stay buried forever. Even when we think we've won, the world has a way of asking for answers. Ethan frowned. Answers to what? You didn't do anything wrong. Henry's lips tightened. Didn't I? Ethan turned to him, confused. Grandpa? Henry stood slowly, walking to the window. The moonlight fell across his weathered face. I faked my death, Ethan. I lied to the world, to my children, to the authorities. I thought I was escaping greed, but I also broke the law. Ethan's heart sank. You did it to survive. Henry nodded. I know. But sometimes, good intentions still carry consequences. The next morning, the sound of tires crunching on gravel woke Ethan. He stepped outside and froze. Two black cars had stopped at the edge of the property. From the first car, two men in dark coats stepped out, federal investigators. From the second, a familiar figure emerged, Mr. Collins, Henry's lawyer. Ethan's stomach twisted. Grandpa, he called, they're here. Henry came to the door, calm as ever. I know. The lead investigator, a tall man with sharp eyes, approached. Henry Walker? Henry nodded. That's me. The man took out a folder. You've been a hard man to find. We have reports of a fake death, hidden assets, and falsified records. You're aware that's a serious federal offense? Ethan stepped forward. Wait, he didn't do it to cheat anyone. He was protecting himself. The officer held up a hand. Son, we just need the truth. Henry smiled faintly. Then that's exactly what you'll get. He motioned for them to come inside. Inside the cabin, Henry poured coffee for everyone and sat at the table. The investigators recorded everything. Ethan sat silently beside him, his heart racing. Henry began, voice steady but soft. It started the night I won the lottery. I thought money would finally give me peace. But the moment I claimed it, my children changed. They stopped calling me Dad and started calling me worth millions. He paused, eyes distant. They fought, manipulated, and used me. So, I made a choice to vanish. To see who loved me when I had nothing. I wanted to test them. But I didn't realize I was breaking the law in the process. The investigator asked, "You transferred your assets before your fake death?" Henry nodded. Every dollar. Into trusts for charity. Not for me. Mr. Collins spoke up. It's true. I managed all his accounts. Mr. Walker donated nearly all his winnings under false names to hospitals, orphanages, and community centers. The investigator looked surprised. You gave it all away? Henry smiled. Every cent. Turns out, peace can't be bought, but it can be shared. Ethan looked at his grandfather in awe. You gave it all, for others? Henry placed a hand on his shoulder. When I saw people fighting over what I earned, I realized it was never mine to begin with. The investigator lowered his pen. Mr. Walker, technically, you did commit fraud, but under the circumstances, he looked at Collins. You said he donated everything? Collins nodded firmly. We can provide proof. The officer sighed. This isn't a normal case. Henry chuckled. Nothing about my life ever was. As the men talked quietly, another car pulled up outside. The door opened, and Linda Walker stepped out, her face pale and tired. She hesitated before walking toward the cabin. When she entered, her eyes met Henry's. Dad, she whispered. Henry didn't speak. The silence between them was heavy with years of anger and regret. Linda's voice broke. I saw the news. Robert's in custody. He's blaming me for everything. Henry nodded slowly. He made his choices. So did you. Tears filled her eyes. I was angry, yes. I thought you abandoned us. But now I see why you did it. We pushed you away. Henry's voice was calm, almost kind. Greed blinds, Linda. But guilt can open eyes. She stepped closer. Can you ever forgive me? Henry looked at her for a long moment. Then he sighed softly. Forgiveness isn't about who deserves it, it's about who needs peace. And I think we both do. Linda cried quietly. I don't want your money anymore. I just want you back. Henry's face softened. Then come back, not to the money, but to the love you forgot. For the first time in years, they embraced. Ethan watched, his chest tight with emotion. A week later, the investigation closed. The federal officers confirmed that Henry had broken no financial laws that warranted punishment. All remaining funds were verified as charitable donations. Henry Walker's name, once buried in scandal, was now being whispered across America as the billionaire who gave it all away. News outlets reported the story with awe. People called him a hero, a man who tested greed and proved love was still worth something in the modern world. But Henry didn't care for fame. He stayed in the cabin by the lake, quietly rebuilding what truly mattered, his family. One evening, Ethan joined him outside as the sun dipped below the horizon. You did it, Grandpa, he said. The world finally knows who you are. Henry smiled faintly. They think they do. But the truth isn't in the headlines, it's in the choices we make when no one's watching. Ethan nodded. You taught me that. Henry chuckled. Then I've done something right. He handed Ethan a small, folded piece of paper. This is the last secret, Ethan. My will. Ethan looked confused. Your will? Henry nodded. I may not have money anymore, but I have something more valuable. Ethan opened the paper and froze. Inside, it read. To my grandson Ethan, I leave the Walker name, not for its wealth, but for its lessons. Never forget that kindness is the real inheritance. As for the money, look under the oak tree. Ethan blinked. The oak tree? Henry smiled mysteriously. Go look. Ethan ran outside toward the massive oak by the lake. Beneath its roots was an old, rusty tin box. He opened it and found a small black notebook. Inside were dozens of names, addresses, and notes, each one a family, school, or charity Henry had secretly supported with his winnings. At the bottom of the last page was a line written in bold letters. Ethan, now it's your turn. Ethan looked back toward the cabin, tears in his eyes. Grandpa, you never stopped giving. Henry's voice came softly from the porch. The world gave me a second chance, Ethan. It's your job to give others theirs. Months later, Ethan started a foundation in his grandfather's name, the Walker Trust for Second Chances. It helps struggling families, single parents, and abandoned children find new beginnings. Reporters tried to find Henry for interviews, but he was gone again, not vanished, not dead, just quietly living in a small coastal town, far from fame, surrounded by peace. Sometimes, Ethan would get a postcard in the mail. No address, no return name, just 3 words written in Henry's shaky handwriting. Keep giving, son. Years passed. One day, standing at a charity event, Ethan told his grandfather's story to a crowd of hundreds. He said, "My grandfather once faked his death to learn who truly cared. He discovered that money can buy loyalty, but only love can buy faith. He taught me that the richest people are those who give, not those who take." The audience fell silent, moved. And as Ethan looked up at the photo of Henry Walker on the stage, smiling, wise, and free, he whispered under his breath, "You won, Grandpa. You won your peace." Later that night, alone by the same lake where everything began, Ethan looked at the stars reflected in the water. A soft wind brushed past him, carrying a faint whisper that almost sounded like his grandfather's voice. Love was always the fortune, Ethan. He smiled through the tears. I know, Grandpa. I know. The ripples on the water shimmered under the moonlight, as if the lake itself remembered every secret, every lie, and every truth that built the legend of Henry Walker, the man who won $333 million and gave it all away to find what money could never buy, love.